Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my personal top 25. The college football playoff polls got released not too long ago. I gotta say, I'm absolutely disgusted. Disgusted. Most of you can pretty much assume why if you've been here for a while. Not too difficult to assume why. But without saying too much, let's get straight into this thing. I like it, subscribe, and help a comment. Always helps. Let's go. So starting off, this is everything. The only difference that I really have with like the top 9, I guess, is I've got Georgia up above Texas. I've got Georgia up above Texas because they beat Texas respectfully. That's Texas's only loss as well as it's Texas's only ranked opponent. I feel like it's only fair, even though strength of schedule to me sometimes seems kind of like obnoxious to look at it from a perspective like Alabama, for instance, who has 3 losses. Like, yeah, they've played a pretty tough schedule, but they have 3 losses. Georgia has the number 1 strength of schedule and their 2 losses. So it's like, yeah, they're losing games, but they only have 2 losses, and they actually have the hardest schedule out of all these teams. Like, they have the hardest so far out of all these teams. So I think South Carolina takes that spot. After this week of football. So they could drop down to like number 2 or something, but still, I think Georgia also on a Georgia team where Carson Beck is not making turnovers and throwing interceptions, Georgia literally could be number 1 undefeated this season. I mean, you got to think they came all the way back against Alabama just for their defense to let Ryan Williams go berserk on them. And then Carson Beck threw an end zone interception, which could have been the push above. Or at least tie it. But he made yet another mistake. Georgia's other loss was on the road against Ole Miss. Keep in mind, both of these are road games. And that one was just a terrible performance by Carson Beck and the rest of the team as well. But in terms of the top 5 by the college football playoff rankings, it's pretty reasonable for me. I just have Texas lower because for some reason they have the easiest schedule in the SEC. I don't know how they got such an easy schedule, but that's what happens when you have 50,000 teams in one conference. You'll get a team like Georgia who gets all the hard teams and a team like Texas who doesn't get any hard teams. But I do have Notre Dame moving up in replacement of Texas and keeping Penn State at the same spot because Notre Dame, quite frankly, has been getting glossed over. A lot of people really are going to hold that NIU loss. They're going to hold them accountable for that until they die, even if Notre Dame wins the national championship, which is pretty unlikely, but maybe possible. People are going to hold that NIU loss against this team until, like centuries later. And that loss could literally go down as one of the biggest upsets in college football history. But quite frankly, looking back on the game, even though it was a close game, every team has had a bad performance this year. Ohio State and Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska may be better than NIU, but still they're pretty low in the conference right now. They just barely got bowl eligible. And Ohio State was in their home stadium. Oregon, you can name a couple. You can name Idaho, Boise State, Wisconsin. They've had bad games. Penn State had that Bowling Green game, or this most recently Minnesota game. Like, all these teams have had their pretty sketchy, close performances. Texas, you could say Vanderbilt or Arkansas. I don't really know Tennessee. You could say Florida. Like, all these teams have had close games, and the problem about Notre Dame was they were having that close game, but Riley Leonard made a hideous mistake at the end and threw a bad interception. 11 plays, 31 yards. NIU kicks a long field goal and they get it. And Notre Dame was driving and their kick got blocked to win the game. Everything had to go NIU's way to win that game. Riley Leonard doesn't make that mistake. It's wraps. And Notre Dame wins a very close one. They could be like number 2 right now. But since that didn't happen, they're going to have that held against them until they die. So I am willing to push past that game because it's just, dude, sometimes that's just how college football is. I don't know how else to put it. It's annoying that I have to put it like that because I wish I didn't. I wish Notre Dame just never lost that game because they are worthy of this spot. They're worthy, I would say, of the number 2 or of the number 3 spot. I feel like Ohio State, even with their loss, if Notre Dame was undefeated, I'd say Ohio State still should be number 2. But Notre Dame, I think they're worthy of this spot. That loss is just going to haunt them. Penn State, I may have gotten pretty vicious against Penn State for their loss against Ohio State because they very well could have won that game. Penn State also had a really difficult, like a really evil call against them where they forced a fumble on the running back. It totally was a catch and then a fumble. That was the biggest pile of bullshit I've ever seen. The dude literally caught it, made a football move, and the ball popped out, and they called it an incomplete pass. And I'm just like that led to 3 points, which made it a 7-point game. But quite frankly, Penn State had the ball 4th and goal, or not even 4th and goal. They had it 1st and goal at like the 1-yard line, and they could not score a touchdown, which made me hate Penn State because I don't like the Buckeyes, first off. And second off, it was just like, dude, how are you guys going to be ranked this high? And you can't even move the ball a yard, which still is sort of the case, but I guarantee you, giving that ball back, they're scoring points, and they could have beaten Ohio State in that game. Rematch on a neutral site, I'm not too sure how that game is going to pan out. But Penn State, their only loss so far, even though they're playing it close and sketchy, their only loss is to Ohio State, which is a respectable loss. So Penn State kind of deserves number 4. Already talked about Georgia, Texas for a bit. Tennessee, I like this Tennessee team. They have a really solid defense, But that loss to Arkansas looks absolutely terrible right now. Arkansas isn't like the worst thing ever, in the SEC, but they're 6-5, and they actually kind of are pretty bad. They lost by 24 points in their home stadium to LSU. They got 63 dropped on them by Ole Miss. They lost to Texas A&M. Arkansas lost to Oklahoma State, y'all. Oklahoma State has not won a conference game. And yeah, it was double overtime, but Oklahoma State came all the way back in that game and won. I mean, dude, Oklahoma State has not won a conference game. So, Tennessee, they might have a bad loss, but apart from that, their only other loss is on the road against Georgia, in which Carson Beck was actually playing really good football. If they can finish business with Vanderbilt this weekend, I'm pretty confident, and I'm pretty fine with this team being in the playoffs. SMU at number 8. I think this is the best team in the ACC right now. I think there's no question that this team is the best team in the ACC right now. Miami, while they beat Wake Forest 42-14, that game was like 20-14 for a long time, and it took all game for them to put away Wake Forest. As well as Miami's loss is Georgia Tech. SMU's loss was early in the season to BYU. BYU's a much more respectable loss, and they sure as hell were playing much better at the start of the year than they are now. So I can definitely say that loss for SMU is way better. As well as we got to remember Miami literally had a Hail Mary caught on them that was taken off the board by review, which probably should have been a catch. Probably wasn't enough evidence on the field to change it, but they did, keeping Miami's season alive. They also had to pull a huge comeback out of their ass against Cal, which Cal is like 6-5, not very good. The only team Florida State, or the only other team Florida State has beaten other than Charleston Southern. So, I mean, yeah, that's not very good at all if you're Miami barely beating them. Like, I don't know. Miami's offense we know is good, but their defense is stinky. And even then, their offense still struggles to put teams in the coffin right away. But who knows? Maybe come playoff time, Cam Ward will enter another element. Boise State at number oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm tripping. I was talking about Miami because I was talking about the ACC. I almost skipped 2 teams. I was like, what the hell? How did I just pass that? My bad. Indiana at number 9. While they haven't had a tough schedule this year, and they did get blown out by Ohio State, I will vouch for Indiana. In another world, They go into that game, and a snap doesn't go through their punter's hands, and they don't let a kick return for 80 yards happen. 14 points were put on the board from special teams touchdowns that pretty much just killed the spirit of Indiana players, got them out of the rhythm, and gave so much passion to Ohio State. Without that, they were going into the locker room 7-7, and the game was being fought well. Indiana was playing well, but you can't let the special teams just collapse like that. Bad mistakes, terrible. I just don't understand, if you're a punter, why are you not wearing gloves if you're worried it's going to go right through your hands? Like, come on, man. Bad stuff. Also, they just, quite frankly, shouldn't be letting a kick return like that happen. It was a good play, but it was also terrible coverage. I mean, like, I thought he was just going to rip off, like, a long return. No, he just kept running, and there was, like, no white jerseys. It was bad. That was where Indiana lost the game, was on those plays. I would pretty much say they lost it when the snap went through the punter's hands. Like, that was something you can't do in a game like that. ASU at number 10. This is where I think the college football playoff poll is absolutely god-awful. I know I'm an ASU fan, but there has been one thing I've done all season long, and it has pretty much been underrate my team. It has been underrate my team. I've pretty much taken every other team over ASU this year, except for, like, most recently BYU. I finally picked ASU, and I almost had a perfect prediction. But besides that, ASU has literally won every single game since getting their starting quarterback back. Their only bad loss is on the road against Texas Tech. But Texas Tech has kind of been a sneaky team. They've also taken down Iowa State, who is in contention for the Big 12 championship. I mean, ASU turned the ball over 4 times against Texas Tech. They didn't turn the ball over once against us. You're not winning a game, and they only lose by 8 points. I mean, they score a touchdown on the first drive of the game. We throw an interception. They score a touchdown. We give the ball up on downs. Like, it was a terrible, terrible start to the game. And we actually started to bring it back fairly well. We started to bring the game back, but we just couldn't convert on 4th downs, and we were making bad plays and whatnot. So, yeah, ASU's got to lose a game like that. But aside from that, their only other losses to Cincinnati, that was with Sam Leavitt injured. That was literally with Sam Leavitt injured. And is this a Florida State injury? No. This was a singular game rib injury. He got back, and we have won every single game. We are also undefeated in our home stadium, even though that's not going to matter in the college football playoffs unless we were to get the home field. ASU is right now on top of the conference. They control their destiny. They've got a big game this week on the road against Arizona. Big game. But quite frankly, ASU took down Kansas State on the road, who's back in the top 25. ASU took down BYU, who had been at the top of the conference for a while. Their only other loss was to Kansas, who is also just turning into the Grim Reaper right now. Arizona State, if they don't lose Sam Leavitt, he doesn't get hurt, I think we beat Cincinnati on the road. We could win that game very easily on the road. And ASU could be a one-loss team. Just with that noted, even though that's not the case, ASU has pretty much handled the Big 12 to a degree we did not expect them to this year. Now, season's not over. They have to handle Arizona and then, of course, win the Big 12 championship to even want to be in a position like that. But I think having teams like Boise State, Clemson, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina over Arizona State is the biggest pile of disrespect I've ever seen. It is the biggest pile of disrespect I've ever seen. Not only that, in the AP poll and the coaches poll, ASU's like number 14, and they still dropped them below South Carolina in Alabama because they just want to put these teams in the – they want to put them in so bad. They want to put them in the college football playoffs so bad. Even though ASU is projected to get the 12 seed, I think it's really fucking stupid how we are even projected to get the 12 seed instead of instead of being over Boise State. I will say it 1,000 times. ASU beat Wyoming 48-7. Boise State beat Wyoming 17-13. Boise State was not like injured against ASU. In fact, most people were favoring Wyoming over ASU. Boise State should have absolutely stampeded over Wyoming. They should have absolutely slammed this team into the floor. The line was 25.5 for Boise State. The over-under was 54.5. 5. Come on. Final score is 17-13. And what do? They go up in the rankings. It's so stupid. The Ashton Jeanty shit has got to stop. He is not the football team. The rest of the football team is not that good for Boise State, and they will get clobbered in the college football playoffs. Oregon had a terrible start to the year. They had an awful start to the year. They almost lost to Idaho in their home stadium. I mean, Idaho is not a good football team, and Oregon could barely put up 24 on that team. It took all game. And, I mean, quite frankly, Oregon was performing terribly in that game and against Boise State. But since then, they flicked on another gear, and they've finally started to find their footing. And Dylan Gabriel is starting to make less mistakes, starting to make a lot less mistakes. And the team is starting to look more put together now. But Boise State having that loss was the worst thing to ever hit humanity because, quite frankly, the Mountain West is so fucking terrible. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to one of the scariest stats of all time. Now, it was happening last week, but thankfully Fresno State pulled through. Colorado State was second in the conference behind Boise State. They had a 52-0 loss to Texas on the road, and they had a 28-9 home game loss against Colorado State, or against Colorado. Sorry, I don't know why I just tripped out. And they had a double overtime loss against Oregon State. This team was undefeated in the Mountain West and getting ready to play in the conference championship against Mountain West, even though they had a 52-0 loss against Texas, a 28-9 loss against Colorado, and a 39-31 double overtime loss to Oregon State. They were getting ready to play in the Mountain West championship game. Now, thankfully, Fresno State pulled through and took them down, but quite frankly, the fact that Colorado State was going undefeated in this conference should show how much of a pathetic conference it is. Boise State is barely winning out in this conference, and a team like Colorado State that lost to Texas 52-0 is fighting in the same exact elements as Boise State. That should say enough about the team. Now, thankfully, they lost, and UNLV is taking over the spot. UNLV cannot lose to Nevada. I don't think they will. I hope they won't, but they cannot lose against Nevada. And we really pray that Boise State loses, even though it's not going to happen. They play Oregon State. But quite frankly, I mean, man, you look at Boise State, they have not performed good. The only game they quote-unquote performed good was against a Oregon team that was really struggling, and I'm so sick and tired of seeing this team. Iowa State, I've got this team way up in the rankings. They're like number 18. They're like number 18, which I think is respectable, or at least it's understandable. But I think this team is actually a lot better than we think they are. Now, they play Kansas State this week. I do think they will handle Kansas State. I think they will handle them. But, I mean, Iowa State's losses are to a team that I have said is sneaky all year long. They lost to Texas Tech by 1 point. They lost to Texas Tech by 1 point. Even though Iowa State had 70 more yards of football, they lose to Texas Tech by 1 point, and it was just unfortunate because a missed field goal could have given them that win, but whatever. Lose on the road to Kansas, to a Kansas team I've also been speaking about all year. My Big 12 championship winner prediction for this season, because they've had that talent on their back, so everybody being surprised that Kansas is doing what they're doing shouldn't be. Those are their two losses, respectable teams that nobody else will find respectable, and that's it. I still think those are really understandable losses. I think those are understandable losses. You look at ASU and Iowa State right now, those two teams are the teams in line to be playing in the Big 12 championship. I'm not sure if Iowa State gets in over BYU, if Iowa State wins. Like, if both teams win, I'm not sure if Iowa State gets in. I'm not sure what happens there. But I can tell you, ASU, I want to play Iowa State. I don't want to play BYU again. I want to play Iowa State just for the diversity of it. But if ASU makes it there. But Iowa State's losses are to respectable opponents. They are ASU and Iowa State meet in the Big 12 championship. They'd both have a loss to Texas Tech. Like Texas Tech is a respectable opponent. They've been a sneaky team all year. They've just been beating themselves down. I think Iowa State is pretty underrated. They also have a pretty solid receiving unit, as well as they have a pretty good quarterback, a pretty interesting quarterback. I think Iowa State's just pretty underrated right now. Ole Miss at 14. I've got Ole Miss overtaking Alabama by one spot because who looked more convincing in their win? Ole Miss. Or over Georgia. Ole Miss looked more convincing in their win over Georgia. I think that's the only real thing separating these two because Ole Miss and Alabama's not unranked losses are both very bad. Of course, Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. Alabama just lost really bad to Oklahoma. That's probably a worse loss than anything Ole Miss has taken. At least Ole Miss's losses have been all close games. 3 points, 3 points, 7 points. Like, they've been close games. Alabama lost by 21. So, I just don't think Alabama should be above ASU whatsoever. Ole Miss shouldn't either, in my opinion. And definitely South Carolina shouldn't. Everybody wants to talk about, South Carolina is on fire right now. They should be recognized. That, like, this team is on fuego. They almost lost to Missouri in their home stadium. Like that, they almost lost to Missouri in their home stadium. Quite frankly, their win over Texas A&M, if Texas A&M had Connor Wayman, they're winning that game. But since they had this Marcel Reed guy, Marcel Reed got a buzz against LSU that carried him to the victory. Once he actually had to play real football, his freshman habits kicked in and he lost. And he's lost 2 SEC games now. I'm not giving that win to South Carolina anymore. That doesn't surprise me. They had to pull a 15-second last second touchdown to beat Missouri. Missouri has not played good this year. They should have beaten Alabama, but they sold. They got killed in their home stadium by South Carolina. And while they should have beaten LSU, LSU is not that good of a team. And so you look at South Carolina still. They lose in your home stadium to LSU. LSU is like a 4-loss team right now. Got killed by Ole Miss. Okay. I guess not really respectable because you guys have the same record, and you got killed by him in your home stadium. And I already forgot South Carolina's other loss. Oh, Alabama. You had the opportunity to win. Alabama was sold with an onside kick, and then you turn it over and you lose. There's no reason this team should be this really highly ranked team right now. They should be up, but nothing crazy. I'm only putting them above BYU because BYU has taken back-to-back losses. That's quite it for me. They've taken back-to-back losses. They're on a downward trend right now. While they will bounce back against Houston, they're on a bad downward trend, and they probably just sold their playoff opportunities unless ASU or Iowa State loses. Like, they pretty much just sold. They just sold the bag away. Like, and that would be devastating for BYU fans. So that's why I've got them dropping down, except I do think they are still a very good team, just losing to very, very good teams. Clemson at 18. I think Clemson is losing to South Carolina. They've got them at number 12. That's stupid. A&M. Who did A&M? Oh, they just lost to Auburn. Yeah, you lose to Auburn, you go down in the polls. UNLV. I've got this team at 20. This team has been competitive. This team should have been the team to beat Boise State, but they sold. They sold. Simply put, like, that game was really close, and they finally got up. And I was praying that UNLV would win this game. But 12 minutes, 38 seconds, Ashton Jeanty, 1-yard run for a touchdown. No more points scored in the rest of the game. No more points. And the way the game finished was 8 plays, 11 yards from UNLV because they were on a 4th and 25. Can't really go for it. So you have to punt it because of bad mistakes, sack, like 2nd and 24, unsportsmanlike conduct, push them back to 2nd and 24, 3rd and 19, and then a sack, and then so they punt it. And what do? They let Boise State go 14 plays, 48 yards, 8 minutes, and 7 seconds to win the game. They couldn't get him off the field. They absolutely blew it, quite frankly, with an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. UNLV given the shot, I think this team can beat Boise State in the Mountain West Championship. I think they can definitely do it. Tulane skyrocketed in the polls, which is crazy to me because, quite frankly, Tulane lost to Kansas State, as well as Tulane lost to Oklahoma. Who have they played since? Their best win was against Louisiana, who's 9-2. That's it. Their best win was to Louisiana, who I don't know who Louisiana's other loss is. Oh, it was a bad loss to South Alabama, of course. But other than that, again, Tulane is just beating bad opponents in a bad conference. They're dropping 71 on UAB. They're dropping 34-3 against Charlotte, 52-6 against Temple, shutout against Navy, who Navy has fallen apart since the start of the year. Tulane's really beating up on absolute nobodies right now, and they're all the way up to number 17. I don't think so. Illinois, number 22. Rutgers, again, absolutely sold away. They absolutely sold away the game. I can't believe you let a guy score a touchdown like that after they were gonna do something else. They were gonna punt it or no kick. They were gonna kick a field goal. They were gonna kick a field goal. I think they were gonna try and kick a field goal, and instead they realized it was way too long, so they're going for it. That golden opportunity put the game away. 40-yard touchdown pass to go up 38-31 with a 2-point conversion, and you lose the game. That's just so stupid. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Rutgers sold that game away, but Illinois ultimately won it, so they have to go up. Missouri, 23. While I don't think it's impressive that South Carolina almost lost to Missouri, I think it's impressive that Missouri went in there and performed so well because Missouri has looked awful against any ranked opponents this year. This was a glimpse of hope for them, even though it's kind of over. Colorado 24, losing to a really hot Kansas team right now. Can't blame you. And then Kansas State at number 25. Kansas State, I guess I should have swapped those two, considering Kansas State did beat them. So go ahead and do me a favor and just pretend I swap Colorado and Kansas State. I just now thought about that. Go ahead and pretend I swap Kansas State and Colorado, all right? Kansas State 24, Colorado 25. Kansas State got knocked out of the top 25 entirely, 16 to unranked with a loss to ASU. But then they absolutely slaughtered Cincinnati. So now they're back in. Kansas State has had a pretty solid season. Their worst loss was on the road against BYU, 38-9. But still, I mean, Kansas State isn't the worst team ever. A big road win against Colorado helps them. Even a win against Kansas helps them, but I don't know if they're going to be able to get it done against Iowa State this week. And Colorado gets to play Oklahoma State, so they've got it. That is my top 25. Let me know what you think of the college football playoff poll that was released today. Let me know what you think about mine. Let me know what you would make yours. And that's all for me. A like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps. I messed up my outro. A like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps. That's all for me. Adios.